start acknowledging that we are in living space, that we're in a living planet, a living earth, and acknowledging that humans cannot be separate from that, but we have to become part of it again. That segregation, so to speak, of humans from nature needs to end, because we're killing ourselves off. When we start killing off the environment, we start killing ourselves off.
Is that the children will be playing in the dirt and digging up worms and maybe making, you know, little fairy houses or worm hospitals, and then bringing over lots of medicine from the trees, you know, the leaves from the trees, worm, you know, child care centers, like all of these things that they're hearing about in the world, they can process through play. And so they do it, that, you know, the earth gives them every life lesson is like metaphorically represented in nature. And so the children are constantly playing all of these things out, which is really cathartic for them. It's a really powerful way for them to process what's happening in a safe space. And so they'll be playing with worms, and then you know, we'll say, okay, it's time to gather the eggs for the chickens. And they'll think, oh, maybe we should feed the worms to the chickens. Okay, great, let's bring the worms over, we'll feed them to the chickens. So a linear thought pattern might be like, well, wait a minute, we just made friends with these worms, we've been taking care of them, we built houses for them. If we feed them to the chickens, that would be sad, right? Maybe, right? That's kind of a linear, way of thinking about it. But the cyclical way of thinking about it is, yeah, let's bring the worms over and feed the chickens. And then we'll feed the chickens, and then we'll gather the eggs from the chickens, and then the chickens' eggs will feed us. And then we'll go back and we'll bring our scraps to the compost pile. And then once the compost pile is thriving, we'll go back, and like when we start digging through it, guess what we'll find? Worms. There they are, you know? And so there's not all of these polarities of like sad and happy, or bad and good, or life and death. It's just a cycle.
Acknowledge the dark, acknowledge the shadow, acknowledge the part of ourselves that is the oppressor, and don't just identify with the oppressed or the victim. That empowers us. When we can identify ourselves in both roles, we can identify that we have capabilities on both ends of the spectrum. We come to a place of wholeness and a place of unity, and from there we can choose our actions and be more conscious and more aware of our choices in our life and our direction.
People use the word evolution to refer to humanity. I believe part of that evolution needs to entail doing something different. And choosing, you know, consciously to embrace different patterns, and to you know, consciously choose you know, different paths concerning the way we live, and how much violence that really needs to entail. I know that to some extent, you know, violence is part of life, just like suffering is part of life. People need to hunt. You know, when people were hunter-gatherers, that is, people need to hunt to kill food, for example. You know, people need to experience pain on some level to live, but how much do we really need to let it rule our lives? And I would hope that in generations to come, you know, even in my lifetime, I hope to see that people choose something different as far as that goes, and consciously, without the force of government, without the force of political power, you know, trying to make them do it. That doesn't work. That's part of the insanity.
It's cannibal disease, and so if you look at what's going on with this, we have this greed, this desire to eat and consume, and that's what really consumerism is. You look at Gabor Mati's work up in British Columbia. He has a book out called Hungry Ghosts, when she talks about addictions. You look at ancient Greek mythology, there is a character, I think it's the king of Thebes, who cuts down one of the trees of Demeter, and she curses him, because this is, that tree was, her dryad was in there, her one of her followers, and it was a living tree. All trees are living, but it was specifically in honor of her, and this king cuts it down, and she curses him with constant hunger in his stomach, to the point where he sells off his daughter for food. He ends up eating his own limbs, and that's what we have now. We have this cannibal disease of constantly destroying, constantly wanting just domination over. So that's another element to this, and power over is another element. So.
And we're reaching out through Facebook, but I don't see that it's, for me, when I'm on Facebook, I'm finding information, but I'm not actually doing anything about it. And it's not till I come here that I feel like I'm doing something about it, even if I'm not directly connected with the issue or the people that I was hearing about that inspired me to get out here and start, working in the garden and teaching children about nature connection and looking for tracks and sneaking up on each other in the forest and making medicine out of the plants on the land. So there's we've got a lot of paradox and irony in our lives, and one of my current teachers was just saying that irony is where the holy lives. And so every time I start feeling that the disconnection between the call from the land, or the irony of the call for connection, and the fact that technology is allowing us so much connection, but there's still disconnection, like that's where we need to go, because that's how we need to feed the holy, as my teacher would say. My current teacher is Martin.
And I are like, I need to get connected, and by connected we mean we need to get lost in the forest. Like, I need to go on a hike. I need to go into the Columbia River Gorge and just soak myself underneath the tree and just absorb that and reconnect, because this is not working for me. This is the matrix that I'm not necessarily a fan of. What we are trying to do through social media is get disconnected from that. Pull the plug, choose red, not blue, right? And just...
They would always tell me, there might be a God, there might not be a God, but Mother Earth, Mother Nature comes first in everything you do. And that has a huge impact on me. I was actually, when they would say that, I was having this epiphany of, I was studying mythology and realizing, there's something to this. Whether they're just archetypes or what, but there's something to this. And then, so I'd go into the forest when I was a kid, and I would seriously hear the forest. I don't know how to describe it without sounding like schizophrenic, but I could hear certain things. And that's that whole battle when I, was fighting development, or so-called development, and that's part of the problem. So what do I see myself as is one of the avatars of Gaia. One of the, I don't want to sound arrogant at all about this, an active agent of Gaia, trying to activate other agents of Gaia to eat up this cancer that is consumer civilization. I keep saying consumer civilization, but that's what it is. And it's not Western or Eastern, it's consumer civilization that's on a global level. And trying to get rid of this disease that has infected Gaia, that has infected Mother Earth. So that's where I see my role in this.
And I believe that we're all connected, and there's this consciousness that we all share. And so if one person's doing this work, it makes it easier for others to take those steps and follow along that same path of healing. So
I have a hard time speaking about nature because it's so much bigger than I could ever understand, and I don't want to minimalize it at all. So just kind of in awe, basically, of this place.